and I doubt there's anybody in this room, or perhaps even watching, who isn't already acutely aware of the nightmare currently being faced by so many Irish families, still residing in their family homes, or indeed in buy-to-lets, all of whom live in daily fear of banks afraid to open their hall doors or even their post.
The real moral hazard is if we simply do nothing.
Right, I'm now reading from last Thursday's repossession list. Derek, Joseph and Anne-Marie, Colm, Stephen Marie, Stephen and Miriam, Colm and Sharon, Paul and Natalie, Ray and Martina, Nora, Chris and Sandra, Abdul and Elisa, Mary, Brian, Andrew and Sinead, Emma and Brendan, Marius and Claudia, Martin, Thomas, Helen, Brian and Patricia, Lisa, Clyde and another Lisa, Desmond and Adrienne, Harry and Martina, John and Antoinette, Michael, another Michael, William and Maria, William, Martina and Patrick, Mark, Gavin and Sorcha, Wesley and Carol, Geraldine and Anthony, Joseph, Patrick, Catherine, Philip and Michelle, Kerry, Sarah and Thomas, Gillian and Philip. These are last Thursday's hidden homeless. They have lost the right to live in the houses they're living in. 41 cases, by my reckoning, 60 defendants. Each of these defendants is entitled, under the European Convention on Human Rights, to effective participation in the proceedings. Do you know who these people are? No, nor do I. How many families? How long have they been living at the mortgaged home? We can only guess, perhaps 10 or 15 years. There's a dearth of sociological data or demographic information. We do not know how many of these are in mortgage arrears for 720 days and upwards, how many are only 3 months in arrears, how many have recently restructured loans which have underperformed. We do not know why they stopped paying. We do not know if there are any freeloaders gaming the system, or whether they are all collateral damage caught in the crossfire of the 2008 recession. The overwhelming impression, anecdotally available to me and to you also in your constituency clinics, I suspect, is that these people are subprime borrowers who should probably never have been given mortgages in the first place. It is not their fault that public housing was unavailable back then. The crisis is not that these people are heavily in debt. It is that when they are eventually evicted, and they will be unless you act promptly, there will still be no public housing for them.
Can I thank you, Mr Honan, for your contribution to the committee and for the previous speakers, and I commend you as a group for the efforts you've done. And I was taken by the point that Mr Riley said that certain people's lives have been put on hold trying to get this across the line, and it's very few times that we actually see legislation written from outside of these confines of the House of the Oireachtas. I want to commend you in relation to doing that in your efforts to try and resolve something that's been plaguing homeowners for the last decade, and it's going to continue to plague them unless we come up with some imaginative solution. The legislation before us, and I note that the chairperson has got it before the Ken Corlias in relation to introducing the legislation. And the spirit of this legislation is something that Sinn Féin have been calling for many, many years. Indeed, when NAMA was established, we called for, at that time, a NAMA for the wee guy. And this is what I would kind of call this. It's a NAMA for the wee guy. It's a co-op supported by the state, which would purchase the loans from the banks and would then treat the borrowers with the respect and dignity that they deserve. And so therefore I, on behalf of my party, in terms of the principles of this legislation, would be willing to support it. There's obviously technical issues that we need to deal with, and that's something that committee stage is there for, and pre-legislative scrutiny. So I would hope that this legislation will be able to find its way to the floor of the Dáil, where there can be a vote in it, and hopefully that we can get all party support, and maybe at this committee meeting we can elicit where different parties and groups stand in relation to that sector.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, it does seem to me to be rather strange that AIB is now trying to offload the worst of their loans. They're out there, you know, it's a fire sale, they want to get rid of them before the sale of the IPO, and it seems to me morally that what the AIB should be doing is handing those loans to the state.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to welcome all of our guests and to thank you all for the documentation provided and the three contributors so far, and to welcome all of the members of Right to Homes, and to genuinely commend all of those here who have been involved, a number of them at the coalface of helping people stay in the home, whether they be mortgage holders or indeed tenants who have been caught up in a horrendous housing crisis. And I think we do share the objective of helping people to stay in their home. That's certainly my objective and the objective of my party, and we want to make sure that any proposals and solutions that are brought forward are workable and achievable and can actually be delivered. And that's the way that we look at it, and the motivation behind the questions that I will put, just to try and tease out some of the issues. And
then I said it will be shameful to think that, given Ireland's history of remarkable land reforms at the turn of the 19th century, we should now think new ideas might be too complicated. And were they smarter legislators back then? No, they kept amending and improving as they got it right. Goodness, by my count, you here in the office have already amended the Codifying Land and Conveyancing Law Reform Act 2009 4 times, on each occasion changing the law about mortgages. Cui bono. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. Change it again. Get it right this time.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I very much appreciate your allowing me to say a few words here this afternoon. I think it's an extremely important matter. I'm rather ashamed that these benches aren't absolutely full. This committee should have every single member here if they're decent Irish people. Half the people here are not members of the committee. They should be here, and I hope they read the minutes of this. I've been interested in this for many years. At the beginning of the financial crisis, I suggested the establishment of a Minister for Home Security to make sure that Irish citizens were maintained in their homes. If you think of the history of the 19th century, Michael Darrett, Charles Stewart Parnell, fighting against evictions. Eviction is a dirty word in Ireland.
Just in terms of responding to David on that, Senator Norris, sorry, on that as well.
David's fine.
I think it's important that, and the context of why I'm supporting this is the wider housing crisis, and that there has kind of been a sense that the mortgage arrears crisis is kind of sorting itself out, that we've seen this decline in the number of people in mortgage arrears. But I think what there isn't either understanding or a failure to see that there's been a relatively low level of repossession up to this point, and the banks have made decisions to hold off on that, and the vultures have bought. We've seen an increase in the amount of, from 2 billion to 6 billion, the amount of mortgages that are actually held by vultures or non-bank entities. But that situation is going to change, and in terms of, if we look at the numbers, in terms of repossessions, that in terms of last year, there was almost 1,600 home repossessions, and that was a significant increase from the previous years. That I think what we're likely to see is a further increase. That we think, in a sense, that the mortgage arrears crisis is sorting itself out, but in actual fact, what we're going to see is an acceleration of repossessions. And if we add this to the already 60 to 70 families becoming homeless each month, and that wider lack of supply of social housing, that really, unless something is done radically and very quickly, this housing crisis that we have at the moment is going to get much, much worse. And while the exact details of whether this is off balance sheet, how it might be set up, I think that needs to be sort of worked out as we go on. But the actual necessity of a radical intervention, I think, is really important. That's the message needs to come across.
Can I continue by saying, I believe there's an avalanche, an unparalleled avalanche of homelessness facing us. We're incapable of dealing with the few thousand that are already. What are we going to do when it's a couple of 100,000? I have to say, I completely disagreed with Michael Noonan, a man for whom I have a certain amount of respect, when he said that vultures were a good thing. They picked over the corpses and so on. I think we should remember these are the corpses of the lives of Irish citizens, and the vulture funds should be stopped in their tracks and, if possible, kicked out of this country. Question, because I know we're under a lot of pressure time, but I really do feel very passionately about this, and I hope that every single member of both houses gets up and shouts as loud as they possibly can about this situation. My final question is a general one to Father McVeary. I mean, you said you don't understand how anybody could oppose this bill. Would you like to expand on that?
Keeping families in their homes, or keeping even individuals in their homes, is for me an absolute priority. To be evicted from your home and to go into homelessness, and I meet many of them, it's a life-changing experience. many of those who are becoming homeless today never for one moment in their lives ever thought they would be in this situation. Parents tell me there's a stigma attached to being homeless. The general perception is that if you're homeless, there must be something wrong with you. And that stigma descends on everybody who becomes homeless. Parents tell me they feel ashamed at having to admit that they're homeless. School children won't admit to their friends that they're homeless for fear they're going to be slagged. Parents tell me they feel they're bad parents, that they have failed their children. So to become homeless is an extraordinary, life-changing event for many, many people. It has permanent repercussions on the children. If children are left homeless, and many of them are for 12, 18 months living in an hotel bedroom, they are damaged psychologically, they are damaged emotionally, and they are damaged educationally. And that educational damage may never be repaired. They're damaged educationally because they're stressed out, and you can't go into school stressed out and give your attention to studying. So for me, this is it is the issue of the next decade. The homelessness is already out of control. Government don't know what to do with it. The only plan in town is Rebuilding Ireland, and Rebuilding Ireland clearly isn't working. It's 11 months since Rebuilding Ireland was launched, and every single month the number of homeless people has gone up and up and up. Last year in 2016 there were about 1,000 extra homeless households compared to the beginning of the year. But that actually masks the reality, because last year, 2016, 3,000 homeless households exited out of homelessness. So in reality, 4,000 households became homeless last year. And if these repossessions take place, we are going to have, I absolutely agree with you, I've used the word tsunami of homelessness. That is going to come down the road, and it's going to be extraordinarily damaging to those people who have to face the prospect of becoming homeless. The state won't be able to cope. We will see whole families living on the street if these repossessions take place. 50,000 mortgages, I understand, in mortgage arrears of more than 2 years. And that number has barely shifted over the last couple of years. And the banks themselves, I think, estimate that many of those are going to be repossessed under the present conditions. We will see whole families on the streets because the state will simply not be able to cope.
May I make one final remark?
Of course, Senator.
I remember about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little bit more, somebody not too far from me in Drumcondra, a woman who had lived in the same house for 60 years, and I went and stood with her as they tried to put her out on the side of the road. I think it's a disgrace to Ireland, and I think it calls into question all these bogus celebrations of 1916. We shouldn't be bothering about that. We should be looking after the people here and now whose lives and welfare are threatened by these vicious foreign entrepreneurs who care nothing for Ireland.
You know, if you're looking at a really crude cost-benefit analysis, but the structure that's being proposed here could deliver in a pretty short timescale, could alleviate the sort of tsunami of difficulties that we're talking about, and also deliver the entire Rebuilding Ireland target for probably half the budget in a really short timescale. To sort of put the numbers in context, you know, you hear 1 in 10 mortgage arrears, 73,000 homes are in arrears in total. Currently in Dublin there's 1,300 rental properties, that's it. There's 3,100 according to the last staff report in the country. That is it.
Now here's an interesting historical fact, Senator Norris. Ireland's land reforms had a head start on Scotland's. We had the Great Famine, and in 1848, shocked by reports of, quote, wholesale evictions on Christmas Day, by the universal practice of unroofing peasants' cottages, and by the crowds of starving and helpless families seeking union relief, the House of Commons took action. Baron Pallas says these facts were then well known to Parliament. Parliament banned them. There's the name of the case there, adding, I myself am old enough to remember the names of the two towns in the south of Ireland, Scull and Skibbereen, being used in general conversation as places typical of the worst horrors of the famine. That was Chief Baron Palace. So the good news is, none of the 60 persons I named at the outset will be evicted next December the 25th. But who here can be confident they won't be evicted the following week? Gentlemen, you are the gatekeepers of legislation. Do not pass the buck.
In reality, we are all public servants. We serve the society we live in. We cannot individually exist in a vacuum. And if we want society now and into the future to be a fair and just society, inclusive of all, we must each of us individually ask the two simple questions in relation to the home mortgage crisis and the consequential impacts accruing from failed attempts to deal with that crisis. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when?